Okay, everybody, let's talk about how to process images for our scan data. So that's the complete. This is me complete from the photo booth. Let's start over though, so I can show you guys how to do this. So the software I'll be using today is called Capture Reality or Reality Capture. It's kind of confusing how they named it. They kind of call it both, but if you go to capturingreality.com, that's where you can download it. So this company was actually purchased by Epic Games approximately a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And the prices have dropped. The software is free to use, although to actually export your mesh, it does cost, there is a fee associated with it. It's not a lot. And it depends on how many images you use to generate that set. But I think for these sets, it'll probably be like $1 or less. But so they actually have a phone app called Reality Scan. I've used it several times. I've never found it to work all that well. I think real images from a real camera, like a larger DSLR type camera, you're going to get a better result. You can try out the phone app. But so the software we're going to be using today is called Reality Capture. So just download your version here. I already have it, obviously, so we'll just go here. So once you get it downloaded and installed, we're going to import our folder with our images in it. If you want, you can just grab your images from your folder and drag them in over here. I'm going to actually go select my folder, which I have on my desktop, and it's in Scan Photos, so I'll just open this. So you can see images, 64 images. So it's imported 64 images from that folder. So there's 66 cameras in our capture volume. Not all of them fire. So if you were to click on this, so let me actually make this bigger. So we have 3 windows in here. So you can actually change these views right here. So we could go single view. This is kind of a startup page for help if you want to look at that. We have a 3 view, which is what we were just on, 2. They have these different formats in here. We'll just stick with this one. So this 1D view lists our photos in here. This 3D view will be where we'll be looking at our 3D mesh generation. And this 2D view is our photo views. So you can actually click on this and change these at any time. I don't know why you would, but you can if you just want to switch things around. If you actually wanted to click through your images, you can see, so a middle mouse scrolling in over here just to kind of make things bigger. If you actually kind of wanted to look at your photo set for whatever reason and just kind of click on these different images, you can do that. So the first thing we're going to want to do is go, once we get our images in here, is to go over to this alignment tab, and we're going to want to align our images, okay? So just go ahead and align the images. This will take a minute. So the software is actually looking at each one of these images, each one of these 64 images, and it's trying to find overlapping points between the images. So it's trying to find those common points, which is why it's so important when you're taking your photogrammetry images that your overlap is at 85% or as close to that as you can get it, okay? So let's make this a little bit bigger. So that was pretty quick. So what we're looking at is essentially a point cloud. These are kind of a representation of matching points within the image or within the data set, okay? So you see these different dots on here, so we can actually choose to expand or contract this box if we want. Since I know that we don't want anything kind of outside of this little cone of data that we collected, because we're kind of standing in that little circle, we could actually make this smaller for the next step. You can click on this and you could rotate this if you wanted to further kind of constrain the box, but it doesn't really matter at this point. So each one of these dots right here is one of the cameras that took the photos. So the software is smart enough that from this image set, it's created a point cloud of me essentially, and it's created a representation of each one of these cameras that took the images. So in our photo booth, we actually have 11 rows of 6 cameras each, so making up 66 cameras. So we have 6 cameras in these vertical stacks that all fire at the same time to create this image set. Okay. So at this point, oh, let me tell you also how I'm moving around in here. So left mouse, this is left mouse click, right mouse click is rotate, and to pan is both right mouse and left mouse, and then middle mouse will zoom in and out. Okay. So we've aligned our images. The next step is to actually create a mesh model from these images. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit normal detail. So this can take a while. Of course, all of this kind of depends on how large your image set is. In this case, we don't have that many images. 64 images is just barely enough. I mean, ideally, like I said, we would have 120 or even 200 images from one of these capture volumes. Whenever I'm trying to capture something out in the wild, like a statue or something, I would probably take at least 200 to 300 images, maybe 500 images, maybe 1,000 images. It kind of depends on how big it is, how much time I have. The more the better. You cannot have too many images for this kind of work. 64 is honestly pretty inadequate. As I mentioned in class, this photo booth was created to kind of create those sandstone sculptures. And the resolution on those sculptures really isn't that good. So that's kind of how they were able to get away with this limited amount of cameras. But, if you were capturing talent that you brought in for a game or something like that, you would really want to take a bunch more images so you can get all the high detail out of a scan. All right, so we're back. So we have our completed mesh model that took about 4 minutes. So 4 minutes for about 64 images. So if we come over here on the right, we can see we have a new model under here, model 1, 8 parts, 13.3 million tries. Okay, so that's pretty big. Let's click on this. So if we control click, we can actually click on this box. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, and I'm going to grab this red dot, and I'm actually going to pull the bottom of the box up. So if you can see kind of the shading change here in the floor. So I just want to bring it up just over that. I'm going to click on the Tools tab. I'm going to click on the Box tab. And then under here, we have all these different options. Select triangles inside the box. Select triangles outside the box. Deselect out inside the box. Deselect outside the box. So I'm going to select triangles outside the box. So because I moved the box up, it's highlighted the triangles that are outside the box. I'm just checking to make sure I don't really have that much of my sneakers selected, which I don't. And so these triangles outside the box are now selected, and I'm going to hit filter selection, which is going to delete those selected faces. So I don't know if you noticed, but we had a new model pop up. So it never deletes your old model. So if we wanted to go back to that original model, we could by clicking on model 1, but I don't. So I'm going to click on model 2, and it's showing me this without. So let me show you this. So you can see that the bottom of my feet is now hollow. It's taken off that bottom. But we have a lot of miscellaneous little triangles floating around. I have some triangles above my head floating around. We don't want any of that stuff. So there's a pretty cool feature in here under Advanced. So if you click on Advanced, it brings up the Advanced Selection tool, and you can actually select the largest connected component, which I want to do. So I'm going to select that, the largest connected component. Let me click back on Tools. I'm not sure why we switched. And there's an invert button in here. So if you hit invert, it's actually going to select basically all the little junk that's not a part of this largest selected component, and then you just hit filter selection. So it will delete all of that other stuff. You'll see we have a new model over here, model 3. Still at 11 million tries. If you want to rename any of this stuff, I think you, oh, maybe you can't. Maybe it's not. No, I think you can. In here, yeah, you can rename this. So, I mean, if for some reason you wanted to, you could rename this to, I don't know, clean, whatever. I don't really do that, but you could. I just generally go through until I get things to where I want. So let's look at this model real quick. So I'm not sure what this is over my eye. So we do have, we do have some junk in here. It's not perfect. Like I said, we don't, okay, so you can see we actually have some very large triangles, so it wasn't able to kind of get this part of my arm. It has a general shape. Because of the hair on my arms and the lack of cameras in this volume, they didn't really turn out that great. It probably would have been better if I had had long sleeves on. You can see that it's attached. It's a little bit close. If we wanted to, we could go in here with the lasso tool and we could try to select this stuff, which is easier said than done in this software. We could then filter this if we wanted to. I'm not going to do that. It would probably, if you really wanted to go in, it would probably be better for you to do this in a program like ZBrush or something like that. My hands, because they were so close to my pants, ended up getting connected. I don't really need my arms in here. I mean, if I did want a full body mesh of me, it's possible I could go into Sketchfab or something like that, and I could like basically cut my arms off at the sleeves, and I could just add some clean, nice topology arms in here for my arms, and then reconnect the mesh. I'm not really interested in doing this. This is for demo purposes, and maybe to get just a face scan or something like that. So we're currently at 11 million tries. That's way too big for Maya. Maya, anything 8 to 10 million is really too heavy for Maya. So I'm going to want to simplify this mesh. So under Tools, Simplify Tool, that will bring up the Simplify window. So we can change this. It's currently set to 200,000. If I was bringing this into ZBrush, I would probably just export this at 11 million. ZBrush can handle that. Or if you wanted to bring it down just a little bit, you could put, whatever, 8 million in here and export that and bring that into ZBrush. For Maya, I'm going to put this out at, we could do 150 or 200,000. So we can actually, each one of these boxes, you can change them by just clicking on it. You see this brings up a pull down menu. So we could put in, it's currently set to absolute, which means that if I put in 200,000, it's going to try to get me to 200,000. We could put in relative, which we could put in a percentage. So say we wanted it to be like 10% of its current value, 10% of 11 million or something like that. I just generally leave this on absolute and put in what I want it to hit. For full body 200, we will see a slight reduction in the mesh. If you wanted your face for whatever reason to turn yourself into an Unreal metahuman or something like that, then I would go in here and I would right click on this, or sorry, control click on this mesh, and I would drag this box up to just get my face and use the box tool and delete everything else, and then just export my head at 200,000. But I'm just going to export my full body at 200,000, or sorry, simplify my body to 200,000. So we're going to go from 11 million to 200,000. Sometimes they can do this in one go. Sometimes it takes more than one go. So you can see it created a new model for us, Model 3, 3 parts, 200,000K. So let's zoom in on this guy and let's see. So you can see the face is a little, it has changed a little bit. If we click back on our previous version, the mesh is a little bit higher quality. Like I said, once you get a texture on this, you're not going to notice any of that. In fact, you could go down quite a bit further than that and you won't notice any of it. But it really kind of just depends on, what you're planning on doing with the model. So we're at 200,000K. I do want to point out that it's not a watertight model. I still have holes in the bottom of my feet. The easiest way to fix this is, and if you're further reducing, it's going to ask you to do this anyway. So if you click on this Tools tab, this one right here, you can actually click the Check Topology button, hole count 2. So obviously I've got a hole in each foot. I'm going to hit Close, and then I'm going to hit Clean Model. So generally this will fill your holes and kind of fix any sort of, edge/vertex errors you're having. So you can see my holes are filled in down here at the bottom of my feet. And I wanted to point out also under here, there is a Close Holes button right here as well. So we could have just clicked this. But anyway, so we're at 200K. It's a watertight model at this point. I'm going to go back here to Mesh Model. And I'm going to hit the Unwrap button. I'm doing this because my model size is, you can do this when your model's at 11 million, but it's not really going to do any good because you're going to have to do it again when you're at your lower, your more simplified model. I'm going to hit Unwrap, and I'm going to hit Unwrap down here. So this is basically laying out the UVs for this new mesh we've created. So it's ready now to accept texture. So I'm going to now hit Texture. You can see that after we do UV unwrap it, we do have a little texture tag right here next to our model, and then we'll just hit Texture, and it will apply the texture to this mesh. So, this process can also take a little bit of time. It really depends on how many photos are in your image set. Because we only have 64, it's going to be pretty quick. If you had 300 or 500 or 1,000, it's going to take longer. I should have mentioned at the beginning of this that a lot of times when you go to align your model, which was kind of the first step, it doesn't always align 64 out of 64 images or however many images you have. Sometimes it'll only align, 48, and then it will create smaller groups of images that it was able to align. It's kind of a much longer process to try to get those images to align. I just wanted to let you know. I mean, with a photo setup like this, it should always align, ideally, it should always align all of your images together. Quite honestly, it's easier generally to go reshoot than to try to get those smaller image sets to mesh up with the larger one. Okay, so there I am. Did a pretty good job with 64 cameras. Oh wait, well that's kind of interesting. I'm not sure exactly why that happened. It looks like we have some red bleed through on my jeans. I'm not really sure why the system decided to do that. It's interesting. Okay, so let's say we're happy with this model. Notice the model it's being listed as being in 3 parts. So I'm going to go to the Tools tab, and I'm going to go to Mesh and Point Cloud over here, where notice when I highlighted it says Export Mesh. So I'm just going to click and write down Michael 2. I'll export it as this. Save. So usually it brings up kind of the paid portion at this point, and I'll tell you how much you need to pay to get this model exported. Once you pay for this, you always own kind of this image set in the model. So if you wanted to go back and re-export it, you can do that. This software also, if I were to bring this into ZBrush and create a lower poly mesh, I could then import that lower poly mesh back into Capture Reality and bake these images back onto that lowered poly mesh. But in this instance, I'm just going to export this model. So I'm just going to run through this real quick. Format version, well, save mesh by parts. So I don't want to save the mesh by parts. It is in 3 parts over here, but I want to just save it as 1 part. So I have that as no. So that'll just export 1 mesh. Format version, I'm exporting as an FBX binary. It's at FBX 2020, it doesn't really matter. I'm just exporting as an FBX. Export vertex colors, export materials. I definitely want to export materials. Export textures, yes. Embed textures, yes. I don't have an alpha. So texture, so this is exporting an 8K map as the texture, as a PNG. So we're just going to hit OK. And that's pretty much it. So now we have an FBX of hopefully of yourself that's turned out decently that you can then do all kinds of things with. So, I mean, theoretically, you could bring this in a Mixamo and rig it up. If this were separated, you could, you know, if you wanted to create 3D print helmets for yourself or something like that, you have, you know, a very detailed model of yourself that you could model on top of. You have a digital model of yourself, so anything you could use that digital model for, anything you could think of, this would be very useful for. Okay, hope you guys have fun with this. Thanks.